Kepner is the largest middle school in the Denver public school system with over 1,000 students. It's located in southwest Denver and has a predominantly low-income Hispanic population. Its principal, Frank Gonzalez, is a proud former Kepner student himself. Now, Denver Rotary has several connections to Kepner. We've had several fellowship meetings there, and also there are a number of students at Kepner who are in our Denver Kids supported program. I've been privileged because of my association with KEEP in sitting in Carrie's classroom on several occasions and to witness how she interacts with her students. She'll tell you more about her approach, but I can tell you that it's very effective, not only for obtaining academic performance, but more importantly, in getting the students to believe in themselves and in their classmates. Carrie has taught in the DPS system since 1985, and she's the founder of KEEP. The acronym stands for Kepner Educational Excellence Program. It's an elective program for students who want to participate in academic travel to Washington, D.C. and Europe. The students earn their own way on these trips, and this is the carrot for student performance in many areas. This program is a model for inspiring students to see what lies beyond the immediate future and has been successfully operating at Kepner since 1993. The KEEP program has been a critical catalyst in causing families, students, and school personnel to work together and to provide the much needed and often otherwise missing connection between home and school. The KEEP program is largely based on the philosophy set forth in a book titled A Framework for Understanding Poverty, written by nationally recognized educator Ruby Payne. And one of the major goals is to break the cycle of poverty. Carrie is fluent in Spanish and has her undergraduate and master's degrees in various facets of education. She's a doctoral candidate at the University of Denver in curriculum and instruction, where she's also pursuing a certificate of Judaic studies. She's the recipient of numerous awards, which I'll just tell you about two of them. One is the 2005 Excellence in Education Award from the Holocaust Awareness Institute at Denver University, and the 2007 Everyday Heroes Award presented by Channel 7. She lives in Denver with her husband Wayne, her daughter Katya, and her Labrador, and rides horses wherever she can at the Classical Riding School. I'm happy to welcome Carrie Olson as our speaker today.
Good afternoon and welcome. As I'm talking to you today, I'd like to call your attention to our PowerPoint that we have. Hopefully it won't bore you. I'm trying to get better at my skills. For those of you who were born before 1975, you know we're all digital immigrants and we'll always use technology with an accent. I'm sure my students could have done a better job. But the picture that you have up there today is our recent group that went to Europe. And that's us in front of Big Ben, and believe it or not, there's 35 of us squished in there. So today I'm going to tell you how I am able to get that many children along with all of my cohorts to Europe and Washington, D.C. My daughter's our tech support today, so we're going to try this out. I don't have one of those fancy clickers because I had to steal a computer and a projector from the computer lab as it was closing today. I'd like to thank Russ for inviting me. We've talked about coming here for a long time. I'm glad that it finally worked out, and I'd like to thank Jamie wherever she went. She was just great in answering all my emails and getting everything sorted out for us. I'd like to thank all the KEEP board members, especially Russ. He's one of our KEEP board members as well, and the KEEP families and the students, 3 of whom you're going to meet today, and of course all of you. Without you guys wanting to hear about us today, we wouldn't be up here speaking to you, so thank you for your time. The first thing that I'd like to tell you about, go ahead, is what is KEEP. Russ gave you a brief overview, but in 1993 I was teaching in Monroe down the street, and I had this wild idea that I should take all of my 35 students to Washington, D.C., and there was only 6 weeks left of school, and of course, you know what the principal told me? No, you can't do this. And then we got the parents all together, and they said, this would be a great idea. So finally the principal said, well, you can go, but if you fail, remember, I told you no. And after I It's a long story, and I won't go into all of it today. You have some of the information on your chairs today, and also you can get the full story on the website. But basically, after I traveled with a group of students from the inner city, I realized that I had been given a gift by my students and by their families. They really showed me what they needed to get educated in school. I came from a small town in northern Minnesota. I had never been in the inner city. I didn't really understand what that was. I thought Mitchell Elementary School and 5 Points looked cute when I was hired in 1985, and then a man was murdered on the corner my first week of teaching, and I realized that it wasn't really cute anymore, and I was longing for a peaceful lake in northern Minnesota. But from then on, I decided I needed to start getting funds ready to help these kids get to travel and see Washington, D.C., and I started sending fundraising letters out of my basement, and I had people who actually sent money to me to help me send children to Washington, D.C., and then along came Jack Thompson, who got one of my fundraising letters, and he said, "This sounds like a great idea. I'll be your board president. Let's establish a nonprofit." So we started a nonprofit organization about 5 years ago, and we've expanded, as you heard, to take kids to Europe as well as Washington, D.C., and if any of you are ever interested in learning more about this, you can come to a KEEP breakfast, which is how Russ got involved. He came and met some of the students at a breakfast one day. It's a time where you come to Kepner for about an hour and a half, and you can sit and have breakfast with the students and hear from them in their own words what being a part of KEEP means to them. Part of the program of KEEP is going to Washington, D.C., as I just mentioned. Now, some of you might say, well, we all want to go to Washington, D.C. We all would like to go to the Capitol. We all would like to see the Smithsonian's. But what makes this trip different from many other trips that you'll hear about in schools is children have to take a year-long elective with me, and they have to study about Washington, D.C. Now, you might think that's not a big deal, but remember, you're a sixth grader, you're coming to middle school, and you get 2 electives to choose from each 18 weeks. But they have to make a commitment to stay with me all year, because I strongly believe that a trip becomes a vacation unless there's the educational component to it. So they have to take an elective class with me. We also don't go with the travel company, so it's not get on the bus, get off the bus, get on the bus, get off the bus. They really travel on the metro. They walk through Washington, D.C. One year we hooked a pedometer to a kid. He didn't really understand what it was, and we realized that we had walked over 100 miles. So since then we've cut back a little bit, but they still are expected to get out and explore the city. We go, of course, to all the Smithsonian's. We go to the Capitol. We see all the monuments. My daughter this year got to go for the first time, so she was very excited. Somebody asked her, "How do you feel about going to Washington, D.C.?" She said, "Well, I don't know. It's just been a fact of my life. I'm expected to go." But she had a good time, luckily. And I write a handbook for the students. So before they go, they read all this handbook on how to travel. Because many of my students have never gotten on a plane. They've never been outside of Denver, and they've never been farther than, maybe their own neighborhood unless they've traveled down to Mexico. So teaching them how to get on a plane, especially you don't mess with the security guards. You may be able to reason with our principal about why you brought your gel to school when you weren't supposed to, but you can't look at a security guard and say, "Oh man, you're not going to take away my cologne and my hair gel, huh, Kenneth?" He knows from firsthand experience that you can't just bring along these things to freshen up in between on the plane without having it taken away. So we talk a lot about the kids about what does it mean to travel? How do you get out and eat at Phillips Seafood Restaurant? How do you go to Tony Cheng's Mongolian Barbecue? How do you travel on the metro? And I'm proud to say many times our children get asked, "Are you from a private school? Are you from a school of wealthy kids? You guys are so well behaved." And in the beginning, I always tell the kids, if you get an unasked for compliment, you get an extra ice cream. Well, by the end of the trip, I'm so far behind on giving them extra ice cream that there's nothing I can do anymore other than say, "Good job." So I'm always pleased to know that my students are well behaved. The next trip that we take is Europe. We expanded in 2003 to go to Europe with our students. When Jackie Arriaga, who you'll hear from in a minute, and I made the move from elementary school to middle school, there were 5 of us who applied for a job at a time, and we told the middle school at Kepner, we said either you hire all 5 of us or you hire none of us, because I recognized that the only way I could do what I do is if I had a team. And one of the conditions of our employment, yes, some of you are giving me puzzled looks. Yes, teachers, every now and then, you go into a middle school, you get a little bit of an attitude. You're like, if you want me, you're going to give me this. So we said, if you hire us, we have to know that you'll be open to going to Europe with our 8th graders. And the principal at the time said, "You prove yourself for DC first, and then we'll talk." We thought, well, she didn't say no, so this is a good sign. So in 2003, we got our first trip to Europe. We only took 18 students. This year we had 35. So we've grown. And again, the Europe kids not only have to give up one elective for a year, they have to give it up for a year and a half. So some of you are already doing the math in your head, and you recognize that that means that they're with me from 6th grade through 8th grade, and we plan it that way. Because we really believe, think for a moment, think back to your middle school years. Some of you shudder. You're right. Middle school is a really challenging time. If you remember back when you were 12, 13, and 14, it's not the easiest time in life. And so that's why